Welcome to Beyond Vows and Veils, your luxury wedding experience. Our podcast, I feel, is a treasure trove of inspiration and insight for newly engaged couples. Join us as we have captivating stories, expert insight, and real wedding experiences that you can listen and learn from. Thank you so much to Umama and Amit, who was a past couple of ours that is joining us today to chat about a couple things that might hopefully support any other couples that are kind of embarking on the lovely wedding planning journey that will take over your life for the next year plus. So I'm so excited to be talking to both of you. Obviously, we refer to you in our office, if you don't know, as the hype couple, because both of you are just like hype. We love you guys because you are always just like hyping everyone up, and we were able to witness that firsthand even at your own wedding. Like, you just both are just everybody's biggest cheerleaders, and we love that about both of you. So thank you so much again for being my hype couple and joining me on my first podcast. Really sweet of you.
Of course. Thanks for that acknowledgement. We love that.
100%.
You probably see so many couples who have to put on such a big show every time. So we know that that's coming genuine from you about us.
Yes, 100%. And, before we kind of dive into things about the planning journey, I guess I really just wanted to pick your brain, because I think that a lot of times when I start working with couples, the first thing we always do is we get on the Monday board, we're looking at budget sheets, we're shopping venues. I think one thing that I really learned from both of you, actually, which you may or not be aware of, is that I think that both of you went into your planning experience having a really clear vision on what your values and key priorities were for the wedding process. What advice or just any insight that would you give to couples that are kind of starting their journey? Because I think that that's almost really important to identify before you sort of start,
Definitely. It absolutely is. And it's actually something that I think we both take, we took that part of our work life and tried to apply it, knowing that this was going to be a very involved project for all of us involved, is to really step back and think about, what do we want to get out of this, right? Yeah. And that, I think there were a couple of bullet points after that we got into, that we tried to figure out, how do we want our guests to feel, right, when they come to our event? What's the story we want them to take away from our story, from our love experience? That was one. And then obviously for weddings in general, but especially for Indian luxury weddings, the feeling of hospitality, right? The guest experience, and how they, all the way from the communication months in advance all the way to day of, what does that actual guest experience look like from the start to the finish? That's something that Umama and I both do in our work, and it just naturally made sense for us to think of this event that way. And I think, for a lot of couples that don't have that experience, or, maybe don't practice that through their day jobs, it's hard to think of things that way.
Yeah. So definitely started with what we wanted the feeling to be, what the takeaway from the guest experience was going to be, but also like what were the values that people were going to leave with, right? It was very important for us that we didn't have a traditional wedding. We literally went out to a restaurant like 3 weeks after we got engaged, and we were like, okay, now we're going to start with the values. We want to respect tradition, but we don't want it to be the default. So how can we honor the traditions, but still stay true to who we were? And that helped us curate who we were going to work with, event planner wise, what city we were going to host the wedding in, who we were going to invite. So it was this kind of guiding star. And the phrase we came up with was
grand yet
intimate. And that helped us make all our decisions.
Yeah.
I think if couples can boil the feeling down to at least like a vision statement like that they can look at every decision they make through that lens. Right?
Yeah. I literally love that, because I feel like a lot of times, even in our field, a lot of times we're kind of navigating more like high level conversations, like, okay, what's the budget? What's the guest count? What's the event dates? But I think that's such an important thing for couples to maybe just, between the two of them, connect on, and then share that vision with whomever they're going to be working on to support them to curate that experience, right? Because ultimately that's such a big part of it. But I love that you said that, Umama, regarding like respecting tradition, but also making it feel like the two of you. And I feel like that both of you did a really excellent job of that, I have to say, for your ceremony. We really loved like everything that you did together. You guys killed it. You guys you guys did it. You delivered the vibe. But one of the other things that I have to kind of turn to is, one of the first things, which is shopping for your property. So I feel like this is what I find to be, and maybe you can give your feedback, but it's the fun but not so fun part of planning is finding the space.
Yeah.
And everyone's always telling me like the pressure's on. And I get it. Like the pressure's on. Like family wants to know, when are you getting married? So we can start inviting people and being respectful of that. What advice would you give to couples in terms of how to even tackle narrowing down the process? Because a lot of times you are looking at maybe different cities, or you've shopped now, you've just toured like 8 different properties and you're kind of making a list. I know when the two of you went on your site visits and you kind of did your pros and cons, you were really organized with that. But like, I don't know, how would you sort of figure out like what is the right fit for setting the scene and picking a property?
Yeah. So when it comes down to selecting the best property for your wedding, specifically your South Asian Indian wedding, we know that it is typically a 3-day experience with 150 maybe plus guests. So that in itself is a very logistical problem to take on. And
Right.
so that's why starting off with that vision statement for us was grand yet intimate. What city is going to allow us to have this experience that tells our story? So for us, it was, we wanted to have our wedding in Spain, but our parents were like, no. So what was the next best thing? So Miami gave us that Spanish Barcelona feel. And Amit also attended University of Miami, and our first place we ever traveled to was Cuba. So it checked a lot of those boxes, so that helped us narrow down that feeling of city. Then it came down to, okay, what locations are going to hold our guests? So 3 parts to this. Number one is, if it is destination like ours was, which hotel can actually hold a big enough room block? That was the biggest issue we had during the vetting process. 2 was, okay, who has space available on a Friday,
Right.
Saturday, and Sunday
in the spring.
in the spring, like in Miami.
Right.
So that was 3, and then, or 2, and 3 was, well, which one is going to deliver the experience we want of convenience, grand, intimate, luxury? And so really it came down to, we knew the Biltmore was where we definitely wanted to have our Sangeet, but we
Right.
knew we needed to find another location for where to host our guest, price wise as well as convenience wise. So it was actually great because Whitney, out of nowhere one day, we just like felt so hopeless with our event search or venue search. He was like, there's this brand new property that just popped up. Let's set a meeting. You guys are going to go. And I mean, it checked all of our boxes. It was the brand new Lowe's Coral Gate. It literally,
it wasn't even built.
It wasn't
at
built.
That point.
Yeah.
And so it checked all those boxes. So I think for us, it was really important to communicate that to our planners and then have them share that vision so they knew exactly what to look for as well. And that combination between the Biltmore and the Lowe's was chef's kiss, absolutely ideal for us.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, for anyone listening, I'm Brittany with a B, and then there's Whitney with a W in our office. So anyone that works with us has a really fun Brittany and Whitney matching vibe. And then fun story, Umama and Amit's designer was also a Brittany. So we had all the knees at the wedding present.
Biltmore Brittany, we had a Ventrix Brittany, and then
we had all the Brittany's that were present. But no, I think that's so important, Mom, and I love that you touched on spacing, because obviously we take space capacity really seriously, and I know that during our planning experience, we sort of had to navigate fun conversations surrounding guest count and how we were going to kind of fit the perfect, like, harmonious amount of seats at the Sangeet as comparison to like keeping it a mix and mingle function. And also the fun thing with Florida, doesn't really matter what time of year it is, like the ideas of contingency plans. So I think that part of it is also really important for any couple, because, I know we had a lot of conversations about, okay, but if it rains, what are we going to do? like if it rains. And I think that ultimately there is a little bit of you still sending a prayer and some positive energy that it won't rain, but like, oh, it won't do that on our wedding day. But I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too. And ultimately I think that both the properties that you selected really supported in navigating that for sure.
I think what
So,
really helped was when we did the site visits. Whitney curated a really great itinerary for us, where it was like, this is exactly where you go. These are exactly the questions to ask. Because if you
mhm,
go in blind as just like regular couple, you just ask like, oh, this is pretty. How many people can we
Hmm.
fit? Instead of
right.
what's the broad path? Can we light a candle in here?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
Oh
great
just
my
point.
God, right.
I remember that on the itinerary specifically that your team created, Brittany, that specifically wrote out these are the questions you should be asking when you
Yeah,
go to this venue. And as the newly whatever engaged couple or to be weds, like we're not thinking of those things. We're getting
right,
trapped in the the magic of the
right,
space. So to have the expert team tell us that these are the things you want to be looking out for was
right.
incredibly useful.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that because I will say, like, even though I'm in the planning realm, I know that years ago, when I had gotten married and I was also doing my own venue researching, it definitely kind of blurs together and you do get caught up in just the excitement. Like, that property looked really great and I think it'd be a good fit and who knows, but ultimately it is important to have like a game plan going into it. And I think definitely a pros and cons list for anyone that is doing the early kind of vetting shopping, like going into it and writing down like what were your big takeaways from that property that you liked and what were some things that you can kind of foresee as potential cons or something to maybe talk to that event coordinator that works that property about that you can otherwise work through or work around. And I
Yeah.
think that
what
helps
can
the
we pull
planning.
out of them for free?
Yes,
Oh,
100%. What concessions are we getting? Because,
yeah.
we're shopping other properties. What are you going to give us? We
Yeah.
always like to know that.
That particularly, not not the comps per se, but after you go through the site visits and after you maybe get it down to two, maybe three venues that you're seriously interested in, I think that was a big turning point for us once we started to get paperwork from these
Mhm.
venues and we started to revise contracts before committing to anything. Brittany, I remember that was several, maybe 1.5 to 2 hour calls that we did
Right,
per contract,
Oh,
where you sat with us to talk through line by line, these
right,
like really intense documents. But for couples out there that maybe haven't done that before, or maybe know contracts but not in the hospitality space, I think that that's a crucial step because we learned, and have heard stories from other couples that venues sometimes they're in sales mode and they may promise some
right,
things on a visit but maybe won't be able to commit to it later.
right,
Having paper trails and writing those things down and asking those questions is important for
right.
couples like us to protect ourselves.
Right, 100%. We call it aggressive hospitality because we want
Yes.
we want to make sure that we're, we don't want to burn any bridges. We want to be your friends. We want to make sure that we have a good relationship, but we're also looking out for our couple. And I think it's really important that we ask the right questions. Like, you guys got hit with the fun, like, we're going to, oh, by the way, we're going to need a fire marshal to come because of our potential plan B of maybe moving in the ceremony space and then the Barat permitting journey. But I think it's just one of those things that if you sort of know up front, like what are the house rules, and then we can play by the rules. But I think it's important that you try to do as much as you can in the contracting phases to understand all that. So you're totally right, Amit. And full disclosure, no wedding planner out there is an attorney. When we're looking at these contracts,
Good
we
call.
are, when we're looking at these contracts, we're guiding you to the best ability in terms of like access times and is this space appropriate for your guest count? Are we getting the right amount of service staff? But it's can be very intimidating and it can be a lot. So I think that kind of transitions me maybe to my next point of hiring a professional. So not every couple out there can or will hire a wedding planner, but I'd love to just kind of hear in your experience for couples who are, I don't know, maybe on the fence or just giving it some thought. What was your experience, not to toot our own horns because I know we worked with you, but what would you say are some of the more like positives of hiring a professional, both in like pre-planning and maybe on site?
This is such a great question. Brittany, I don't even know if you know the history of this, but before we decided that we even wanted to work with a wedding planner,
oh.
uh, Umama herself, being the total awesome. I was going to say bad A, but that she is. She's an incredible event planner herself and has worked in the event industry.
Hmm.
She wanted to take it on herself.
Yeah.
And, that was a very real possibility for us for
Hmm.
a good amount of time. And, we felt like it was the only way that we would be able to control what we wanted to control and make our vision come to life. And, I had my doubts, but I also believed in the fact that, we can do a lot of things and we wanted to be able to do it. But
Right.
ultimately, I think it came down to the fact that we finally realized, after I think it was one hotel that we called ourselves, and realized that they're not even, we don't even have access to the right people just by ourselves,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
If we just immediately realized that we need a professional's help here. And I think, what couples should be looking for when they're doing research on event planning teams that they want to work with, and what stuck out to us about your team, Brittany, was the fact that it's not an all or none situation, right?
Right.
You can hire an event planning team to do everything under the sun, but that doesn't mean on the other end of the spectrum that you have to do it by yourself. And I think what we
Sure.
really liked was that we had options, right?
Hmm.
There was, hire us a month before our event and help us more focus on the production timelines. That's cool.
Right.
Yeah, we definitely see value in that. Oh, but there's also, the 3 month, 4 month before the event, and we can help you, with like permitting, which maybe needs 6 months in and of itself.
Right. Right.
I think couples should be able to suss out those options and feel like they still have that control.
Hmm. Yeah.
And ultimately, it came down to just preserving our relationship. I mean, that was what Amit came to me, and he was just like, I want to love this engagement period with you and make sure we are totally present at this wedding. And he's seen me in event mode and didn't want me to be stressed. And that was what this was us sharing our vision and having professionals execute on it, and project manage it for us. We work full time. Our parents are also full time. So we just needed someone or a team that would help project manage that. And that was truly the biggest reason for the investment. And it paid off 100-fold because we were 100% present during our wedding.
Yeah.
So for couples that truly have that goal and want to make sure their families also are totally present, invest in the planner. Also, just take no inventory of your time, how much you can dedicate it leading up to the wedding. If you cannot, because it is a very robust project to take on,
Right.
outsource that, because we planned one event on our own in Atlanta and it was chaos. So we learned our lesson, and I highly recommend some package with a planner.
Sure, absolutely. And I think maybe just one other thing pertaining to planners in general, and it doesn't even have to be about us, it could just be in general for couples that are seeking support. What questions do you feel like would be vital for couples to ask planners, or I don't know, just important details for them to consider when hiring a professional? Because I get this question a lot during even potential clients of mine during the consultation process, like, well, what did we not ask you that we should be asking you? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I feel like we've covered it, but I think for me, I mean, some of those things are, ultimately, do you double book weekends? How many weddings do you take on a year is usually, I think, one of the more important questions to ask for obviously any cultural events. Do they have that sort of background? But do you have any sort of, I don't know, things that were in the forefront of your mind?
Okay, so when it comes down to picking the best planner, the number one question to ask is, what is your communication style? How do you like to communicate? For us, that was huge. We are very tech savvy, so we needed a project management platform and using email or the project platform to communicate updates and timelines. We had heard horror stories about text message threads and lost emails and from other couples. So that was number one. Number two was just experience level. How many weddings has the team planned prior, and how many of them had pivoted off of a traditional wedding track? So those would be the two questions I would ask.
Yeah, those are two very good ones. I have two very different ones as well. I think Indian weddings are so family oriented, and
Mm-hmm.
there's so much involvement from the family.
Right.
I think couples should always be ready to ask, how is this event planning team going to help me manage the questions from my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
both sets of parents are going to be, vying for control, and there's going to be opinions and
Sure.
everything running around. But at the end of the day, your event planning team is going to be the one to kind of lay down the law and say, hey, look, realistically, this is possible, this is not, but I hear your concern, I hear your desire, let me go
Right.
check on that.
Be respectful.
Right.
Be respectful, right? And I think that for Indian couples, South Asian couples, that is like one of the most important things that they can find in a team. And then second, who just gets your story, you know?
Right.
We had been on a couple of calls with potential planners that kind of came out of the gate running with a pitch deck and spent 30 minutes telling us all about them, but they didn't ask us about our story and what we want, and that was a red flag to us. And having a planner that actually is curious and cares about your vision, so that they know they can execute on it.
Vision and budget, like respectful of it, and it'll go back to it, reference it always in conversation and decision making.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. Absolutely. Those are good, you guys.
Yeah.
I love your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I think that, just a couple other things to touch on that I think are important is, obviously wedding planner is one of many vendors that you hire during your whole planning journey. Obviously, we won't get into like the specifics of every single hire, but obviously no wedding is complete without your tribe, the people that are going to essentially carry out that vision. Maybe just share with me how you feel like the interviewing process is really vital in terms of selecting your vendors, or just in general, like your journey to creating a tangible product at the end of the day of what your vision really was to start, like on that napkin at the restaurant, ultimately when you were interviewing all these vendors, how do you feel like your vendors executed, and what do you think was really supportive when you were vetting them before deciding ultimately to proceed?
Yeah. I think we should go through just like one example, which was
Totally.
decor. So the journey of picking decor was very big for us because we are big designers ourselves. And so to trust someone with our vision was very crucial. So I think we had interviewed about 3 different teams that were all local. We decided we wanted to go with a local team so that they could be ready on site, and for us to go interview and actually see their warehouses.
And production suites and things like that.
Yeah. And so ultimately, we interviewed the 3, but the person that stood out to us and was hands down our favorite vendor outside of Eventrix was definitely Petals Productions, Brittany. I mean, wow, someone that just got our vision and just ran with it. She respected our budget. She would test our boundaries too, and just say, hey, I know this is your vision, but I love this so much that I have this idea. Do you like this? And would always help us be curious, but then also would come back. And that she executed that every single day for us. Her team was super efficient with communication, like other facts.
Yeah, I mean, so we hadn't experienced this before, obviously, but once in the planning of these meetings and the vetting of the decorators, they create a lot of content and like mock-ups and things like that to help the couples see the vision. And Petal's ability to take an email and maybe a couple of slides that we had put together on like styles and things like that. Pinterest boards. We did a lot of that, which was great. But Brittany's ability to take all of that input and then synthesize a true like complete vision out of that, I think was just you don't really see that all the time, and I think that's what separates.
And it came to life. Once again, every decision with decor was, is it grand yet it's intimate? And she made every guest feel that way. Until this day, our guests are still talking about that feeling of walking into the Biltmore, walking into our reception.
Yeah.
I also want to mention though, when you're hiring teams like that, it's as the couples, I think the story gets told sometimes that, you're hiring these people, then, it's their duty to kind of know what you're thinking. And that's just not true. Brittany, Umama and I were so involved in the creation of like
Yes.
documents to explain what our vision is.
Yes,
So
you
many
were.
documents.
Your mood board still will go down in history as like the best mood board. It was so detailed. I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
it. We should actually hire you to create mood boards for any future couples.
Templatize
Literally,
guys.
it was gorgeous.
We love doing those
Yeah.
things.
You were
But that's
clear on
what
your
we
vision.
like, and I think that's what makes us such a strong couple too, is we are very goal oriented. We set these visions, but we also want to execute, but we know it also comes with outsourcing the best talent. But you have to be able to communicate what you need, and that comes with your own personal research too. So you can't just rely on the team to pull things out of your head.
Right. Yeah. And I so appreciate, I think one thing that we even picked up from both of you during our planning process is that you would both take the time to say, even after a call, if you didn't know an answer right away, it's totally fine, by the way, if you're on a call with a planner or anyone and you don't know the answer right away and you do need to regroup. And I think that you both often did that. Like, you know what, we're going to actually check in on this and we're going to regroup with you. And I just so respected that about both of you, because I think that there was probably a lot of times during planning that you wanted to regroup to make sure, are we on track? Is this within alignment of our vision? Is this going to ultimately deliver the result that we're going for? Is it worth the investment? Is this the right partner? And so I feel like both of you did a really good job at that. So kudos to both of you.
Yeah,
for sure.
In life with that.
A lot of circling back.
Yeah, a lot of circling back.
A lot of that, I'm sure.
Boards help so much. Like that project manager, I cannot get over how great it was to have this visual timeline of what the deadlines were. And I mean, our planners are on our ass when we were not following through, but we needed that because life was also happening at the same time, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's sort of finding that balance and also being respectful. I think for even, I don't know if any potential planners listening, but for any potential planner too, like communicating with your couple on, when is your busy time with work? When are you taking time off? When are you not available? When should I not be bothering you? So I think it's sort of ebbs and flows, right? Because you obviously have deadlines, but you do also want to make sure that you're being mindful, respectful that your client has a life and a full-time job and other things going on. So it's a lot. It's a lot for sure. But
and just last note on the vendor hires, I think the main thing is you're going to know when you feel right with the right vendor because number one, they're hearing you, they are producing results, and you're seeing the execution happen. Communication will always be the strongest thing, but make sure you have a tier of which vendors are most important to you and allocate your budget based on that, because like we knew that decor and food were going to be our biggest expenses, but then we were like, okay, maybe like we nix party favors or make that on the lower end, or signage, like just figure out what those buckets are and then have your budget that way, because you will also get a lot of unexpected charges for those bigger high vendors.
Yes, and temptations. I feel like our industry is full of really fun upgrades that you will be met with along the way.
Yeah, but then also ask what are the concessions here, and don't be afraid to ask for those. I think our planners helped us guide what concessions to ask for, which was really important.
Sure, 100%. And then I guess I'll just sort of end on this note. So we always say here in the South, you don't know what you don't know. Is there any sort of parting advice that you would give to couples in general for just overall? It doesn't even have to be planning. It could be just checking in with each other. It could be, I don't know, just anything that was a big takeaway from you from the whole experience.
So many takeaways. I feel like we grew so much as a couple during this period because it felt like, it was like a little business we were creating at the end of the day, right? Like our marriage is this union, but also understanding that this wedding was about celebrating community for us. as a couple, it's really important to figure out what those shared values are just as a couple, and then how everything you produce together and do together align with those values. And for us, our values include community, growth, freedom. And so we wanted to make sure our wedding experience, we curated, honored all of those. And I think as a couple, I think it's really important to understand that you do not have to do the same copy and paste templatized wedding. Like, don't be afraid to venture out, but you also shouldn't venture out where it doesn't feel comfortable. For us, we're a very fun couple. We love games. We love interacting. And we knew we wanted to be the MCs for our wedding, and that we wanted a field day for our haldi. We wanted minute to win it games in between all of our Sangeet programming. We wanted a female pandita for our Hindu Muslim wedding. So all things that, were a little challenging for our parents to understand, but we helped them understand that this was important to us. And then our event team helped us execute on that. And truly, it was the best experience we could have created and set the foundation for our wedding and our relationship.
Gosh, how do I
love
follow that?
I know.
I think anybody who's planned a wedding or been involved in planning a wedding knows that the journey and the process is a test of your ability to communicate and to have sort of this emotional intelligence in the way that you communicate what you want, but also communicate things that you don't want and don't work. And so I would just say to couples that are, deciding or considering going on this journey that, there's going to be friction. There's going to be difference of opinions between your families, between your vendors. But I think if you can just, figure out a way to keep your, level head and figure out a way to communicate exactly what you want, precisely, but also in a very, productive manner, that is going to take you so far, and have a great event planning company to help you do that.
I love it. I love your response, and that's so amazing. I think honestly that's such a big takeaway, because ultimately I know planning a wedding is definitely a long journey. It can come with a lot of ups and downs, but ultimately keeping the focus on the two of you and what your goals and priorities and vision is so important. And by the way, Umama, I think in your past life you were like a professional MC. Like I think that my whole crew is like, wow, Umama literally could be like hired as an MC. You did such a good job at your hobby.
No, I mean, Amit and I host a lot of parties together, so we get a lot of experience.
Ready. You were ready for that event. You were ready.
This was like very clear from the beginning. Amit was like, if Umama doesn't host this, she's gonna start shit.
No, you told me. I was like, no, Mama can't be on the mic. Like, she's the bride.
Yeah, you were like, you're not gonna have energy. You should probably have an MC. I was like,
Brittany, just wait. Just trust us.
I was literally like on the sidelines, like, okay, like this girl's got it.
Yes.
She's running the show today. I love it. Well, thank you guys so much again for giving your insight and experience. Honestly, it really is so supportive, and I hope that other couples out there will really resonate with it.
Thank you for starting this and for asking us these questions and putting this out there. I think so much of this needs to be discussed, and people are looking for this kind of discussion. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. You're my first ever couple. So
Yay!
Thank you.
Yeah. No, we're so excited for you. And thank you for the impact you've had on our relationship and life. Our parents and family till this day are like, oh, how's Brittany and Whitney? They're the best ever. Like, truly had an impact on us. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you both.
Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you.
Thanks.